Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today and we're taking that dive back into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I did enjoy my time quite a bit during my preview, which I'll have linked in the description down below if you have missed it. Do check it out. I spent 3 hours playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Also, my friend Jayvee did the same thing. He interviewed a couple of the devs on the team as well and has been creating a ton of Assassin's Creed Valhalla content. So it just made sense for two redheads to pair up and talk about 5 things that can absolutely improve in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. While we both enjoyed our time with the game, there are some aspects that I think can be tinkered with before launch to help make this the best possible game. Sadly, some of it is seemingly baked in, but it's going to be me and Jayvee. We're going to be alternating back and forth. It's going to start off with Jayvee and it's going to end with me. So let's go ahead and get this one started, kicking it off with parkour.
Parkour is a staple of the Assassin's Creed franchise. It's one of those things that makes the series feel distinct and unique. In Valhalla, I found no real evolutions from the previous games, and that just disappointed me. I understand why they might not focus on it. First of all, there's not a ton of climbing in Dark Ages England. There wasn't a ton of climbing in Odyssey or Origins, save for those big towns and villages. So they decided to scale back the parkour system overall. But to me, it's never been as satisfying or engaging to hold down a single button and watch my protagonist climb or go over obstacles. I thought it was very fun to manually put in jump buttons and side ejects and all of these different inputs in order to see my character perform those moves. It made it feel like it had depth. Assassin's Creed Unity to the general gaming audience probably feels like a failure that never fully recovered. But to this community, Unity is seen as the golden standard of parkour, of what it could be today if they didn't reboot the entire series with Origins. And while it's unrealistic to expect parkour to be completely reworked when it's something that we're not doing nearly as much in the newer games, my worst fear is that it's going to feel so clunky that it's going to ruin those bigger town areas where the game requires that we lean on the parkour to navigate and perform stealth and whatever we need to do. While this is something I think Ubisoft needs to improve, I'm not sure there is a realistic solution for parkour ahead of launch. It feels like the automated parkour systems are so baked into the engine at this point that I don't know if they'd be able to address it. I was pleasantly surprised to see tree parkour make a reappearance in the series, but it's just not a substantial leap, an evolution over what we had in the last 2 games.
First thing I want to highlight is raid rewards. I think raids are one of the biggest focal points of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There's a sense of real spectacle and epic battles as you and your fellow Vikings storm the beaches and engage in visceral combat, pillaging for plenty of loot. However, what you get at the end of these raids are sort of underwhelming. They're usually just materials, and part of this may be the product of the demo I played. I did not see the full extent or really anything at all when it came to the settlement mode. And so that means I don't know what certain rare resources will do when I bring them to said settlement. However, I speculated a bit on the idea of raids giving you unique weapons, unique armor, stuff that had a degree of rarity, because you are in fact heading into these villages, these places where factions are holding it down with tons of armor and weapons, and yet you usually just walk out with materials. And just having intangible stuff that you have to bring to another progression system, I feel undervalues the performance of the raid itself. It starts to feel down the line maybe a smidge of repetitiveness because you're not engaging with a new item that you unlocked from this very specific raid. Let's say you get a new mace or a new axe and you're like, okay, cool, I got this from a raid, now I can switch this weapon, go on another raid, try this out. I think that alone would be pretty exciting and would compel you to continue to dive into these raids. But as I experienced, as I continued to do 3 raids in this entire demo, all of them just yielded materials and not much else.
Of all the battles a man can fight, the war against himself is the hardest to win.
One of the worst things you can do in any RPG is give a lot of screen time to cutscenes and talking to characters and making choices, but at the same time not dedicating enough resources, time, and attention to polishing those cutscenes to make sure they are rock solid. Valhalla's cutscenes came off somewhere between unpolished and unfinished, and either of those outcomes is a little concerning when the game is only 4 months from release. Now, we don't know when this build was finalized, but it doesn't really matter to me because this is what they decided to show press, and what we saw was not very impressive. Since the game shifted towards more of an RPG formula where you're making choices and you're seeing your character talk to hundreds of NPCs over the course of a playthrough, cutscene quality has become a priority. And a lot of people talk about how they don't like the cutscenes in Odyssey, but going back and playing the other day, I noticed they are really high quality. The textures, the animation. So regardless of how we feel about the writing or the situations that happen in Odyssey's cutscenes, the quality is very solid, and it's something that you'd want to see in Valhalla, but somehow this part of the game seems to have taken a back seat or a step backwards from the previous game. In the demo, any of the world event side missions where you could talk to an NPC used the secondary camera angle, so it didn't feel quite like a cutscene. You were still rooted in the world without having to cut to black and then deliver a formal cutscene. While I do appreciate that lack of break and immersion, it kind of keeps you in the experience without reminding you that you're about to watch a cutscene, the quality was just not up to snuff. If there is one thing that I would beg Ubisoft to spend a lot of time polishing before launch, it's cutscenes, it's cinematics, it's these things that people are going to spend pretty much the most amount of time looking at outside of combat.
Do you remember, Altair, what it is the assassin fight for?
Peace, in all things.
Yes, in all things. It is not enough to end the violence one man commits upon another. It refers to peace within as well. You cannot have one without the other.
Creed presence. There is no excuse that a game with the Assassin's Creed label is not putting the Creed on the forefront. I'll be the first to admit that very few Assassin's Creed titles have really compelled me in a narrative aspect. It's always been about exploring the world, getting involved in all the activities, and mostly the characters that are there. But when it comes to the Creed itself, that doesn't mean that they should just outright ignore it or hide it, abandon it. Maybe it's helping them bottom line wise to continue experimenting, and they have said that there is going to be a lot more of the Creed in this game compared to the last entry, Odyssey, where it was absolutely underneath everything. But I was personally a bit disappointed to not see any activities, any nods whatsoever to the Assassin's Creed. To me, I really wanted to see that because I feel over the years, Ubisoft has improved a lot, and I'd like to see them take a real crack outside of Origins at doing a Creed-like story. Because the Creed always plays a factor at one point or another, but it never feels like a focus. And maybe for some people, they sit in the boat of, we've already seen that. We've seen many entries of that. To me, it starts to feel more like, as I said in my preview, history of the game, where you're going to different time periods and you're having these great open world action games, but they're less and less of an Assassin's Creed title. That's coming from someone who has really enjoyed some of the innovations that Assassin's Creed has brought to the forefront. Odyssey is one of my favorite entries. I love how they innovated and changed things completely up with the franchise. Really shaking it up helped, but I feel like there are some narrative pillars that could have stuck, such as if you're going to keep the modern day stuff, then you should keep a bigger focus on the Creed. I don't feel like the Creed was one of the narrative limitations, so I think overall they deserve a lot of focus. This once again could be the product of my demoing experience where they just wanted to hide that stuff, hide spoilers. I've listened to a couple of interviews and they keep continuing to say like, yeah, there's going to be the Creed, there's going to be the Creed. But when you spend like 3, almost 4 hours with the game and you don't see any Creed whatsoever, I don't know. I just find it a little bit worrisome. And that's even completing all the story missions that were available. So I wouldn't mind seeing a little more Creed in my life.
Ranged combat just never felt great to me in Origins and Odyssey. I'm not sure what it is. I think the best way to describe it is that it feels too loose, too floaty, kind of like a bad third-person shooter. After seeing how much time they spent reworking the melee combat system to make it feel gritty and authentic to the Viking experience, I was disappointed to see that ranged combat was basically untouched. I understand there is a crowd of people that liked the ranged combat in Origins and Odyssey, and when they saw a similar system in Valhalla, they thought, this is great. Why would you fix something that isn't broken? Bow and arrows were so unsatisfying for me to use in Origins and Odyssey that I was one of those people hoping that they would address it in Valhalla, but seeing as they haven't, it's just one of those areas of the game that I don't think I'll spend a ton of time doing because it's not fun to me. The easiest way Ubisoft could address this issue for people like me is to move the camera angle in more. It makes you feel like you're more in the action, like you're having an impact, like your attacks have weight to them. It's funny because the Predator bow attempts to do this. It attempts to put you in the action by giving you a first-person angle, but I find the transition from third-person to first-person very jarring. The best solution, from my opinion, is to give us a Horizon Zero Dawn angle. Now, you may be wondering, this isn't much different from what we get in Valhalla. It's a tiny bit closer, but I promise it would make all the difference.
All right, and that'll wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen. 5 things that Assassin's Creed Valhalla could definitely improve on. A big thank you again to Jayvee for joining up with me for this video. I really appreciate him hopping on board. This was one of the easiest collaborations, by the way, a little behind the scenes action here, that I have ever experienced. I literally pitched him the idea on Twitter. He was like, I'm down. I said, cool. Sent him my ideas. He sent me his. He sent me an audio line. I recorded this. It was one of the simplest, smoothest collaborations ever. Usually there's like a lot of just back and forth trying to figure things out. But anyway, appreciate Jayvee. He's been a friend of mine for years. He's doing great stuff for Assassin's Creed Valhalla and many other open world titles as well as RPGs. So go ahead, give him a look. I'll have his channel linked in the description down below. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up this video. I hope you did enjoy. Let me know what you think of Assassin's Creed Valhalla and some of the changes that we suggested in today's video in the comments down below. And I look forward to hearing from you. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. Big thank you to all the patrons who just continue to kill it with that support. Appreciate each and every single one of you. And I'll talk with you soon. Stay sexy, stay active. Love you all. Peace.